All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Now, I told you I was going to do a review of the first episode of Vince McMahon's documentary. So, if you're not wanting any spoilers, please pause, go watch the show, come back and see me because today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the first episode of the Vince McMahon documentary. Now, also, I'm in a great mood because this is one of my favorite things to do. I love talking about wrestling. So excited. I even put on my best Macho Man Randy Savage shirt. So sit back, relax. Let's talk about some of this documentary. Now, first things first, one of the things, overall review, if you've watched WrestleMania documentaries or Hulk Hogan documentaries, you're going to find a lot of this stuff is going to be the exact same thing over and over again. The one thing that I did like is that they did talk about Vince McMahon's early childhood and how he actually took over part of the business from his dad. Now, do I think it was 100% accurate? I don't think so. I think other people have been able to say that it didn't go exactly the way that he thought that, or that he tells it. But one of the things I do think is cool is I did keep the code of um, them saying that Gorilla Monsoon, I think it was actually Gorilla Monsoon, Arnold Skolin, and there was a third piece of the pie that if Vince McMahon was late on any of his payments, it would automatically go back to them, and then they would be the owners of the WWF, and they would be able to keep the money that Vince McMahon made. So I did like that they talked about that. I also like that they showed that some of the wrestlers would kind of dispute a little bit of what Vince McMahon said, because once again, Vince McMahon, even in the documentary, tells you, he doesn't like talking about himself. But I think Triple H was the one who came out and said, Vince is only going to let you see what Vince McMahon wants you to see. And I think that's kind of prevalent here in this in the documentary too. Now, they didn't go deep into his childhood. I've read a couple of different books and I think a couple other documentaries, and he didn't have a great childhood. That stuff is true, but he does like to embellish a little bit of some of the stuff that he did while he was a child in boot camp and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of cool that they hinted at it, but they didn't go deep into it. I don't think that I would have liked to see it, but I don't think that they need to at this point, right? Then we move into him actually buying the wrestling territory from his dad, which was cool. One of the things that they also forgot to mention was that when Vince McMahon did buy out, one of the first things that he did was he left the NWA, which at the time, NWA was like the leading wrestling force in the actual country. So there was only like one major promotion that was the AWA that wasn't a part of the NWA, and then like ragtag groups weren't part of the NWA either, but they usually got crushed out or didn't make hardly any money. Now, the other thing that I did like is that they talked about how the territorial system worked. Now, one of the things that we did find out is, WrestleMania starts coming. So what does he do? How do you kill off your competition? Well, you take the best parts of it. If you take the best parts of it, and that's what people are paying to go see, and you take them, and then you literally give them right back in a different form, but under WWF banner at the time, that's going to make your company grow. I mean, there's no two ways about it. I take it to the Chicago Bulls back in the 1986. If you take Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, and put them on another team, that team's automatically going to have viewership that's going to rise. So I mean, it just makes sense. Now, the other part that we're talking about is the actual WrestleMania. He supposedly leaves, goes on a mini vacation, and the entire time this whole epiphany of WrestleMania comes to him. I think it's funny that they kind of omitted that the person who actually came up with the idea of WrestleMania was Howard Finkel. Supposedly, the way that the story goes, Howard Finkel goes, well, they had Beatlemania. Why can't we have WrestleMania? And everybody loved it and jumped on the bandwagon. Now, we start talking about how WrestleMania was being put together and that if it was a high stakes game, Vince McMahon loses, then he loses everything. People have disputed that, saying that, he actually had quite a bit of money stored away, so it wasn't going to be the end of it. So pick and choose what you believe in wrestling as anything else in the world, right? So one of the cool things that they did hit on was that they started talking about some of the scandals. I did like that they actually did bring that up. a lot of times when we talk about WrestleMania, especially if it's a WWF based documentary, a lot of people like to omit that. They did a great job with that on this one, but they also have some that are like the Dark Sides of the Ring, also kind of hit on that kind of stuff. So if you're wanting a different documentary that's not being helped by the WWF in any way or WWE, you may want to look at that Dark Side of the Ring too. That's another good documentary series. But one of the things I do find funny is some of the interviews and some of the clips, it looks like, are some of the same ones that you saw on A&E. I mean, that's how basic this first episode, I think, was, as far as going from the Vince McMahon beginning. But as soon as they got out of that and they started talking about wrestling, I think they were talking about the same thing that you would hear at just about any documentary, like I said, with WrestleMania. And you can't speak about WrestleMania if you don't talk about Hulk Hogan. So this was a lot of towards the tail end based on Hulk Hogan. Now, when we leave the first episode, we're start talking about how we're basing it and getting it set up for the rest of the WrestleManias in the second episode. So, I overall I thought it was okay, and I'm going to say it was just okay because it is entertaining. It's wrestling. I'm going to love wrestling documentaries, but what I want to see is I want to see more Vince. I think when you saw more Vince McMahon, it was more entertaining because it's stuff that you haven't seen. Tony Atlas being on there, Bret Hart being on there. Those are kind of some shocking names that were on there. So I'm anxious to see what episode 2 entails, and are they going to dig a little bit deeper? Because the first two scandals that they talk about were kind of, pretty easy. They're kind of like the softballs, choking out the host of the like that talk show. Okay. And then slapping the reporter from 2020. Okay. Kind of softballs. Let's start talking about like some of the other scandals where, debauchery starts taking hold. I want to see how in depth and how deep they're going to go with that, because there's going to be a lot of things that are going to make you kind of squirm if you've never heard about it before. So, anyway, very, very good documentary for a start. Can't wait to see what episode 2 does. So, we are going to talk about episode 2 later on. So, with that being said, not a whole lot of meat and potatoes in this one. Hopefully, we'll have more in the next episode or the next talk of episode 2. So, have a great day. Have a better tomorrow. Be nice to yourself. Be nice to others. What's it going to hurt? Have a great day, and we can't wait to see you again.